Since the fall of man, a war has raged between good and evil. Over the centuries, this war has distorted the truth. Now the truth is perceived as lies, and lies acknowledged as truth. To this day, the battle continues as we investigate and debate the truth behind the history and mystery of the universe. We are Paratruth Radio. We all enjoy holding that brand new, freshly printed book. Whether we're at the store or a library, there's nothing quite like the scent of paper, ink, and binding glue. But what if every time you went to get a book, you found yourself stuck in your own paranormal horror story? Enjoy tonight's talk on haunted literature. But beware, the episode is due back in 1 hour. Now Paratruth presents Tomes of Terror with special guest Mark Leslie.
All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of Paratruth Radio. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And tonight we got an awesome episode here for you. It's going to be another ghost-themed episode for you. We've got Mark Leslie, author of Tomes of Terror, Haunted Bookstores and Libraries, and it's going to be a good one. So how's your week been so far?
It's been pretty good. Just got all of the music back, or most of it, for the film, and it's pretty sweet. So I'm going to be messing with that tomorrow. In the next couple of days here, I should say. Man, it's getting close. Getting close to the end of this movie. I'm so excited to be done with it. Move on to the next project at this point.
That's how I felt about getting the book done too. So, but I have to wait a while for publishers to get back to me, so you can at least get it into the circuit and get going. So, all right, folks.
It's true. That is true.
As I said, we do have a guest on tonight, Mark Leslie. So, without further ado, we're going to go to the line with Mark Leslie. Mark, welcome to Paratruth Radio. How are you tonight?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. We've been looking forward to this. We've had a lot of people asking us about getting more ghosts on for us to talk about. So I thought what better way to do that than get you on for your book, Tomes of Terror. So for everybody who hasn't heard of the book, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So for the video, I'm just going to prop up the book because you got to have product placement. The Tomes of Terror is subtitle is Haunted Bookstores and Libraries. And I started doing paranormal books, and I apparently was fond of alliteration because I did Haunted Hamilton, then Spooky Sudbury, and when I was doing the bookstore one, I had to find some alliteration in the title, and that just seems to be part of the trademark for me. But the thing that was most exciting to me about this is I've always been fascinated by stories of the paranormal and ghosts, and I've always been afraid of the dark. And I've always been a very, very passionate lover of books. So to be able to put together a book that combined two of my greatest passions was kind of like a very bucket list activity for me. It's a book I have long wanted to write, but I wasn't able to do it till I got to that point in my career as a writer where it was actually, okay, now it's time. The things, the movements are right for this book to come into being.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, how long has this book? I mean, I know it's been an idea for you for a long time, something you've wanted to do. But had you already started the research early on in your career to prepare for this book, or is that something you kind of waited for the right time to start doing?
I'm always eager to listen to stories. I mean, since I was a child, sitting around the campfire at Cub Scouts, sharing ghost stories, and so I've always filed stories away in the back of my mind. Having been a bookseller for 25 years, there were a few stories people had shared with me, so that when it was time to write the book, I went back and contacted them and said, "Hey, remember that ghost story you told me? Can you tell me some more? I want to put it in a book." Which, people sometimes get frightened, when the writer's like, oh, no, you can't put that in a book. I was just sharing this with you. But everyone was pretty gracious about it. I actually did, most of the book was written within probably a 4-month period. The research and the writing was pretty much done in a relatively truncated timeline.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, doing the paranormal books and just getting into the paranormal, and doing the research and all that, have you gone to a lot of these places that you put in the book, or?
That's the big challenge. I like to. So for Haunted Hamilton, because I live in Hamilton, I was able to go to most of the places personally. Because Tomes of Terror is an international book, I was only able to go to maybe a dozen of the places. I'm lucky enough through my travels that a lot of the research that I do is talking to first-person people, research from books and newspaper articles, and whatever resource I can get my hands on. But it was really funny because after Tomes of Terror was published, was the first time I actually was in St. Pete's, Florida, to check out Haslam's, which has the ghost of Jack Kerouac. So it was really interesting to get to the bookstore after having written the chapter. And then, of course, when I got to the bookstore, one of the staff says to me, "Oh, yeah, I just saw Jack 2 weeks ago. Let me tell you about it." I was like, "Oh, man, I could have used that in the book, too." So it's kind of like, well, I guess if I do a revised edition, I can, I can share that story.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, when you were visiting these places, did you end up having any experiences of your own that or at least were really hoping to have experiences of your own?
It's sort of it's a mixed blessing, because I think it'd be interesting and fun to have it, but I kid you not, I am the world's biggest chicken. So if something were to happen, I would probably have a heart attack and faint dead away right in the spot, or I would jump out of my skin. I often get this sense of, the stories, you're in the place, and you go, oh yeah, you get that creepy, chilly feeling, up your spine. But I get that all the time anyways. I'm in a hotel, in a beautiful old hotel in London, and of course I'm like, I wonder what's wandering around in here that I can't see, because I'm alone and I'm scared. That's just how it works.
I think doing the research into the paranormal, you have to be scared, because otherwise you don't know what you're going up against. So
yeah. I mean, that is a lot of people ask, is like, you're such a big chicken, why do you write this? And I've always been drawn to the shadows, the dark corners. I've always been drawn to the unknown and the unexplained. I've always been intrigued and fascinated by it. So maybe it's therapy to help me with my fears, which I apparently have lots of them. but it's fun. And I say, well, why do you go on a roller coaster if you're afraid of heights? There's a thrill and a joy in experiencing that adrenaline rush that you get from those experiences.
Also facing your fears.
Yeah. Facing the fears, although I'm the big chicken, so I sort of face them and then kind of hide behind the shadows.
I feel your pain. I'm a big chicken too, especially when it comes to being in the dark by myself. I can't do it. So going through the book, I had found a couple of stories that I thought were pretty interesting. But I wanted to ask you first: were there any ones that stick out in your mind that you liked writing about?
You know what? It's really funny because going back, I'm looking back 2 books ago because I'm already working on the next one. And I go back and go, oh, yeah, I remember this. This was fun. I actually really did enjoy Haslam's bookstore, The Ghost of Jack Kerouac. I just, as a bookseller, the concept, because as the bookseller, you deal with authors come into the store and rearrange, they move their books around and try and put them in eye level and stuff like that.
Right.
And to hear that the Ghost of Jack Kerouac continued to do that after his death, there's just, it's a funny story, and you're like, and you, as a bookseller, you just shake your head and go, yeah, even after they're dead, they don't stop doing those things. I think one of the ones that stands out in my mind as serendipity at its finest was when I was in Lincoln City, Oregon. I was there for Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush. They run the professional Fiction River writers workshops, and in the social evening where we're all gathered together and just talking as writers, one of the editors, Carrie Lynn Hughes, says, "Oh yeah, you work on paranormal books, don't you? I just released something." And she goes, "What are you working on now?" And I went, "Oh, I'm working on a book called Tomes of Terror. It's haunted bookstores and libraries." And she goes, "Oh my God!" And she pulls out her phone and she texts someone, and it's the manager of Bob's Beach Books in Lincoln City, which is a small town of 6,000 people. She goes, "Oh my God, I just told Diana, she's going to see you." We set up an appointment for the next day. And so during the lunch break, I zipped off down to Bob's Beach Books, and I went in and I met with Diana, and a beautiful little bookstore. And she told me the story there. So, I pulled up my recorder and I recorded the conversation. And it was just this amazing moment where I had no idea or no intention that there was going to be a chapter about that bookstore, but I happened to be somewhere where it happened. And I think something like that is just so fun when you can, I guess, be in the right place at the right time. And so that one I remember in many ways because it wasn't, I hadn't prepared for it. I hadn't done any research. I just show up, learn about the place, talk to the manager. She tells me a story. I think it's awesome. It's not even a ghost story. It was more of a eerie occurrence. I mean, was it a ghost? Did these people actually disappear? So that was one that was fun. I mean, there's so many of them. I mean, I'd probably end up walking my way through the whole book if I didn't stop. What were one of the ones that you had said that you had?
I know.
The one that I had come across that I found really interesting was the Blue Man, Arundel Castle, because of there being 4 separate ghosts. One of them being a woman in white. And then the Blue Man himself, and just the fact that it seemed like it was a residual haunting because he was constantly always just going back to the books and perusing through the books.
And that went back to the 1600s or something like that, right? Yeah,
1693, I think you said it in the book. So.
Wow. So, and it wasn't the Blue Man Group. It was a different sort of Blue Man that, and he's looking through the books. He's looking for some elusive passage.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. And that's the thing is, I couldn't get, that was in England and I couldn't get to the locations.
Right.
That would be a fun tour is maybe a retirement tour is where he's like, how many of these locations can I actually physically go visit now?
Now, did you notice throughout your research, depending on the age of the bookstore or the library, whether there was more witnesses for different accounts, more paranormal activity for an older store than there would be for a newer store, or they all kind of seem similar to some extent?
I think in a lot of cases, and this is one of the sad things about this book is there were a number of bookstores I wrote about that were no longer open. And there was a time in my research when I went, am I going to find any bookstores that are still open that are haunted? Or have they all closed? Because, retail, things change over time. I think the most interesting thing is that in a lot of cases, the building wasn't originally a bookstore. The building was someone's house. The building was something other than a retail environment. But definitely the older a building is, the more likely that something has happened in the past. I mean, people have different theories of what ghosts are. Are they the spirits of the departed who have yet to do business? They're not complete with the business of their life, so they're bound to the earth until either forever performing the ritual, forever stuck in a loop. Are they potentially images like on film? That something so traumatic and dramatic happened in time and space that the spirit's no longer there. This is just something that happened that left an impression in time and space there, and other people who are very sensitive to seeing, extrasensory can actually see those visions. So I think the longer a history of a place, the more people who have been there, the more lives and spirits that have actually been in that space, the more likely they are to have left something behind. So, I mean, I always find that fascinating, depending on what people believe. There's different theories that you could sort of follow up on.
Right. All right, folks. We are talking to Mark Leslie, author of Tomes of Terror. We are going to go to our first break, and you are going to hear Eric's random fact of the day, and we will be right back.
Now, Eric's random fact of the day.
Did you know that everyone thought Abraham Lincoln was ugly, including himself? According to FactSlides.com, once, when he was accused of being two-faced, he replied, "If I had two faces, would I be wearing this one?"
This was Eric's random fact of the day.
All right, folks, welcome back to Paratruth Radio, right here on the Paratruth Radio Network. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And we've been talking to Mark Leslie, author of Tomes of Terror, Haunted Bookstores and Libraries. If you guys are watching the YouTube, you can see the book right there for you. Now, Mark, one thing we were talking about just before we went to break there is the different theories that there are of what ghosts are, or the different type of hauntings. Me and Eric have been doing this a long time, and as we've gone along, our views have changed a little bit. Eric's has changed quite more so than my own. But in your opinion, what do you think each haunting is? Like, did you come across some that were similar that you could say this is an intelligent haunting over a residual, or?
Yeah, I think in this particular book, there were so many stories of people who were so dedicated, passionate librarians who were so dedicated to their life, their life passion of being a librarian, that they never left, that they stayed behind. And it's not an eerie thing. It's not a frightening thing. In many ways, it's a touching thing, that they were so committed. They were so in love with the things they were doing, the people they were working with, that they couldn't leave. And I mean, some of the stories are, and when forced into retirement, she died quite quickly. The same way that lifelong spouses, where they've been together for 60 years, and then one of them dies, and then the other one dies very shortly after, because it's like, I can't live without you, is the underlying sentiment, which I think is just beautiful. But I think there's a lot of beautiful and touching ghost stories that they're not necessarily eerie or frightening at all. So I think we I think we as humans have a real connection with one another. That we can have a real connection with place, and I think that can really tie us to a person or tie us to a place. in a very passionate and powerful way. Not necessarily a traumatic, horrible, nasty situation, but in many ways touching. And I was delighted to discover in several of the books that I've put together that there's always some sort of beautiful, touching tale of someone, somebody connecting with a lost loved one or whatever the case may be. And it also gives us hope. It really does when you think about it.
So that wasn't any of the librarian from Ghostbusters. None of those happened, right?
No, nothing ultimately that scary and frightening. But no, I mean, there's the one ghost who's actually the staff felt so connected to her that she actually has, I think, is the only ghost that I was able to find that has her own library card as well. Oh. So there's fun stories like that where, it's kind of, I guess one way that people react to the paranormal or to ghosts is through humor. Mm-hmm. There's the nervous tittering, the nervous laughter, and you just kind of roll with it and say, well, I guess we should get her own library cards, and she's never leaving. She's obviously a patron. So I think that's one of the things that I think people are often most surprised about when they come to a volume like this. They maybe expect it to all be scary campfire tales,
right?
And some of them are scary and frightening and eerie. Walking into the Mary Read Library, and in the complete darkness, you see a ghost sitting there. I mean, come on, it's not good for your eyes to read in the dark. It's just sitting there reading in the library. And I just think, wow, that would be kind of eerie. You go in, you turn on the light, and there she is. She's been sitting there the whole time reading in the dark. And you're like, well, okay, didn't your mom ever tell you? It's just not good for your eyes. You can't put an optometrist in the afterlife. I don't think.
Well, now you said you had done research across the board, as in across the world, on different the libraries and the stores. So depending on where it was located, did that tend to change the type of haunting or how much activity seemed to appear or happen at that particular location?
I think with England and Europe, right, you have the hundreds of years of history rather than 100 or whatever that we have in North America. So you have that, and the tales go back a lot farther. So in many cases, there's more stories because they've accumulated over time, as opposed to, we just discovered a ghost in 1990. And we only have one story about it so far, or a couple, handful of tales. I think one of the things that I find is most interesting is that when you look across different cultures, you look across different societies, one thing that is very, very common is that ghost stories are very common no matter what the spiritual, religious belief, what the culture, what the society is. Ghosts seem to be ever present. It seems to be a very common thing. So whether you're in Mexico or in England or in Australia or obviously North America, the stories are similar in many ways. I didn't really find that much difference, depending on where you went to. Mm-hmm.
So you have been doing research into the paranormal for quite a while now. What got you interested in it? For me and Eric, we went through our own experiences of hauntings and stuff. Did you have a haunting as a child or as an adult, and that's what got you started, or was there something else?
Ironically, and up until about 2 years ago, I used to be able to say I have never encountered a ghost to the best of my knowledge. That changed a couple years ago at a hotel. But I think I've always been fascinated with the fact that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophies, to paraphrase Hamlet. But I think there's just been something intriguing in the tales that we share about the afterlife, about ghosts and about hauntings and things like that. And I guess I'd always been drawn to that. I think I do write fiction as well. I write, and it tends to be scary stories and things like. And again, when people read that, I go, "Well, that's not horror." I said, "Well, it's got a paranormal aspect to it, so it's not can't call it science fiction. I can't call it fantasy. I can't call it contemporary literary. Horror is kind of the catch-all for it. So no, it's not some guy in a hockey mask chasing people around with a chainsaw. It's a touching ghost love story. But I think I've sidetracked away from the question, and I don't think I even answered it properly.
Well, in a roundabout way, you did. Yeah, I mean, like me and Eric, and we just started doing a series last week about our own paranormal investigations that we did several years ago. But what got us started into it was I had several instances where I had interactions with a spirit or a ghost, whatever you want to call it.
Actual interactions with them?
Well, yeah, like for example, I saw a shadow standing in my dad's home when I was younger, and I got up to walk towards it because I was like half asleep, and it just disappeared. And then both Eric and I have both messed around with the Ouija board when we were younger. So it fascinates me to ask why people get into this, because is it the same as Eric and I, where we've had these instances happen, or is it just mere curiosity?
Yeah, I think curiosity. I mean, I played with an Ouija board as well when I was younger, and was hopeful that we could have something, but also terrified that something would happen at the same time.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the one thing that I find interesting with just people within what we call the paranormal community. Just people who enjoy researching and investigating stuff like that. Is I think people within the paranormal community, they're kind of a special breed. You look at a person who isn't really into the paranormal, and they're like, no, I'm not touching that. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I'm not even going to read stuff on it. It's too scary. So I find it pretty interesting. And I'll be honest, it's weird. Like you saying that you've always just kind of been interested and curious, but you haven't had any real experience when you're young. It's kind of interesting to me and surprising too, because it's not often you come across people who are just generally or genuinely interested, But going way back, and this is probably hard to remember some of the times, but you're talking about how you like to listen to the ghost stories and Cub Scouts and stuff like that. So was there any story when you were young in particular that really just like sparked you and said, ooh, I need to know more about this. This is just really interesting.
I think one of the things I most enjoyed about the ghost stories were the tales were often about a place that you were. Mm-hmm. And whether they were completely fictitious or whether it was something that actually happened, people were sharing something about this place. Like, we're here now and this is what happened here. And that led to a huge curiosity, thinking, here's a place where we are now doing something, big bonfire or whatever. Mm-hmm. Other people were here before us. Other things happened here before us. What were those things, and how are we tied to those things in the past? And interestingly enough, because this sort of led to actually sitting down to write my very first paranormal book, Haunted Hamilton, was I never liked history. I was bad at it in school. I could never understand why people would want to read about stuff that doesn't matter, because it all happened long ago. I mean, I was just a horrible student when it came to history. I could just not get through my thick skull. And I went on a ghost walk in Ottawa, Canada's capital, which has a rich history. And when I got the typical ghost walk where they have the lantern and the Victorian garb and they speak in a really creepy voice and they walk you around the downtown core, you mm-hmm. learn so much about the history of the country and so much about the buildings and the architecture and the people who live there. And then there's a really neat ghost story that's tied into it. And I learned that I actually adore history And when I write each of the books, the one thing, because I think about those Ghosts Walks, and I think about how they merged a wonderfully fascinating story with history, and I learned something while I was having fun. And so the challenge I have now when I'm doing the research on these books is I end up falling into the history so much that even in Tomes of Terror, I don't know if you noticed that there's a sidebar section in a lot of the chapters where my editor said, all right, too much backstory. Too much about who built the building and when they lived and all these things that I found just fascinating. He went, the people who are into the paranormal are going to fall asleep. I said, no, it's so cool. And so we came to a compromise, and they said, I have an idea. I'll pluck out all that backstory. We'll put it in a sidebar so you can just stick to the ghost story. And then anyone who wants the richness and the history, it's there for them. But they can... If they want to skip it, they can move on to the next chapter. So, I mean, that's one of the challenges. I imagine me, a guy who hates history, so fascinated by it, and that was something that I learned about myself that I never expected or suspected.
Now, going through these stories and the couple of places that you were able to visit and whatnot, a lot of places now are starting to advertise that they're haunted. Have you come across any places where, like, bookstores that are still open that advertised that?
I can't think of bookstores that advertise that they're haunted. I'm in London right now, and I was looking for I'm a craft beer enthusiast as well.
Oh, okay.
Imagine craft beer ghosts. But and what I found was so fascinating was I went, there's a pub down the street that's part of a chain that does advertise that one of the locations is haunted, and then I discovered there's a walking tour where you can go from pub to pub. And it would take you the whole day because it's quite a number of pubs, and there's a story behind each building, behind each ghost. And I'm thinking I got to come back to London just to go do the tour because I'm here for work. So I have I'm at the London Book Fair. I'm at a conference, and so I'm there all day for hours and hours of meetings. And there's no way I could slip away and do this, but I think it gives people another way to show that this place is interesting and worth going to. But I can't think of any bookstores that I encountered that actually advertise that there's a ghost. Some of them embrace it, but I mean, you walk into Haslam's, come on, the Ghost of Jack Kerouac, one of the literary greats from our, the last century in American literature. And wouldn't you want to advertise that he's still there? Hey, it's not like a special author appearance, but the guy's just there all the time. Like, I'd advertise that. So it's fascinating. But again, and there's no signs or anything about him. But when I mention it to a staff member, she's like, very matter of fact, yeah, let me show you where I saw him. And let me tell you the story about what I was doing and where I saw him and how it freaked me out, because he walked that way. And then she just thought it was a regular customer and then realized when she walked by the book, the biography, that like, oh my God, that was him. I just saw him walking down the aisle and he disappeared. So it's like, wow, okay, that's pretty, that's fascinating.
It's interesting that there is a haunted bar crawl in London. I do have to say that I think
a lot
Eric
more ghosts at the end of the tour, apparently.
I think Eric and I would love to try and do that one day.
I would. But he says it's a walking tour, and I'm just thinking, would I be able to walk in this end? I don't know. I mean, it might have to be dragged. I don't know. Okay.
Just get a little wagon and something to drag you.
I mean, the fact that many of the bookstores don't advertise that they're haunted, I could see a reason why they wouldn't, especially like here in America or in North America. Just, I think a lot of people they're either skeptical of the paranormal or they're just frightened by it. And so if you advertise that, hey, come to our store, it's haunted, they might lose business because of it. People will be like, no, forget it. I'm not going now, So I could see why they wouldn't advertise it. But it would be interesting, I think, if they had a website or something like that, for their store, and they had a little link for people to visit who are interested. Like, hey, check out the history, and somewhere within the history. But
well, that's actually, and you reminded me, there's not a bookstore, but there is a library. There's a library, and I'm trying to remember, oh my God, is it in Indiana? that has the Gray Lady ghost. I'm trying to find the chapter so I can get the proper. Is it Evansville, Indiana? Is that the? I'm just trying to get to it so I can. I'm not lying, so I'm actually telling you the truth about the.
That's where the Gray Lady is. Yeah.
Yeah, the Gray Lady, and this is a library that very adamantly not only has stories for kids about the ghosts, but they actually have a live ghost cam. You can go on their website and you can check out the live ghost cam, and I think I got put into a box at the end of it. But you can basically go to. God, I thought I had the link in the book here. You can go and live watch. They have 4 cameras set up, and you can take screenshots of the live cameras, and then you circle like if you saw some shape or anything like that, and people like it's crowdsourced ghost watching from afar. And I found it so fascinating that not only do they have that as a way to draw people in, because that teaches people about the history of the building. That reminds people that the library is a tremendous and amazing resource for community. And so that was one of the ones that I think is amazing. And then the kids section. They have a lot of fun with the Ghost of the Gray Lady. There's a lot of resources that, child participation, right? Maybe some people would say, but you're scaring the kids. But, it brings them into the library. It's willardghost.com. Or libraryghost.com. Those are the websites. You can go and write, 24 hours a day, you can go and just see what's going on, which I thought was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So, at the beginning of the show, you said you're a big chicken when it comes to ghosts and just the dark. So, a lot of the people that you've met throughout your time of researching these libraries and the bookstores, they seem very animated and just like yay for this ghost in our building. So, did you ever feel compelled just to be you're with them, to acknowledge the ghost, say hello, so and so, my name is whoever, and just kind of try to interact with the ghost, or is that something you just try to keep your eye on the cusp or whoever you're talking with, and that's it? Like,
well, yeah, I've done that when I've gone on ghost explorations, like in middle of the night with a friend with the meters and stuff like that, where you reach out and try to talk to the spirit. Yeah. But I've never done it when I was interviewing someone in the location. Only because it was a place of business or whatever, and you didn't want to freak out some of the customers who were coming in. It was just pretty much a quiet conversation where they would share a story quietly in the corner with you. Or even in some cases, I was talking to a bookseller at one bookstore who was telling me a story about a previous bookstore they worked at, so we weren't even in the same space as well. So no, I not in that particular case, although yes, I have done the asking the questions and looking for, responses and in the activity and the feedback.
Okay.
Now you're saying that a lot of these people were comfortable with pretty much the hauntings for the most part that you had done the research on, but were there any that were like more terrified about it?
There were some people who really didn't want to talk about it because they were just so afraid, and so there were some people who had stories that I just was like, so and so said, yes, I'll tell you this story, but oh my God, something happened to this other person, but that other person wouldn't want to talk about it because they were just so disturbed. And again, you have to be sensitive to. Do I want to drag them for the purposes of me putting this in a book? Do I want to drag them through that experience that they don't want to talk about anymore? So that was one where it happened sometime, or even sometimes when I've approached a place and I talk about what I'm doing and what I'm researching, they won't let me in. They don't want to talk about it. This is a historic building, and it should be treated with respect, not your, and then they get the very the skeptical mindset and a very much closed minds. They shut the doors and say, no, you're not here to play around. This is a serious historic building, and so I have had that happen. But for the most part, people are pretty gracious and pretty accommodating and willing to share.
Yeah. So I guess, I know you've talked with all the owners, employees of these places. Have there been any customers of the stores that have come forward who have also witnessed something for the brief moment that they might be there, or have you heard stories about it?
I didn't have firsthand experiences of that, but there was a story of a used bookstore in Barrie, Ontario, Rivendell Books, where a gentleman bought a beautiful old history, a war history book, and he brought it home, and apparently he brought home a spirit with the book. The spirit was not to the store; it was attached
right
in front of his closet in like this old-fashioned garb from and then again he saw him the next night standing beside the book on his nightstand. And he actually consulted a priest, and the priest actually ended up recommending that he take the book back to the bookstore. And when he did, the man who had come with the ghost was gone. We went back to the bookstore. And so the ghost was attached to the book that, I mean, imagine you go to certainly an interesting buy one, get one for free.
All right, folks, we are going to take our second and last break here of the evening. We are currently speaking with Mark Leslie, the author of Tomes of Terror, but we will be right back after Justin's Paranormal Headlines. And now, Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
How's it going, Parafans? Justin here with your Paranormal Headlines. And these headlines are from unexplainedmysteries.com. Did human diseases doom the Neanderthals? Recent studies have suggested that disease carried by modern humans may have proven catastrophic. What ultimately brought about the extinction of the Neanderthals, a species that roamed the Earth for over 300,000 years, has been a topic of heated discussion among scientists for decades. While their disappearance is generally thought to have coincided with the arrival of modern humans, it hasn't been clear exactly what processes ultimately contributed to their eventual demise. Now, however, in a new study published in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology, scientists have revealed new evidence to suggest that infectious diseases may have been responsible. Their findings indicated that these diseases had appeared much earlier than previously thought, and that modern humans were likely to have spread some of them to the Neanderthals. For the Neanderthal population of Eurasia, adapted to that geographical infectious disease environment, exposure to new pathogens carried out of Africa may have been catastrophic, said anthropologist Charlotte Holdcroft from Cambridge University. However, it is unlikely to have been similar to Columbus bringing disease into America and decimating native populations. It's more likely that small bands of Neanderthals each had their own infectious disasters, weakening the group and tipping the balance against survival. Is the entire universe just a simulation? Is what we see and feel around us actually real, or do we exist within some sort of computer simulation? It might sound like the plot of The Matrix, but the idea that we live inside a simulated universe is something that several scientists, including those who attended the 17th annual Isaac Asimov debate at the American Museum of Natural History earlier this month, take quite seriously. The event, which was hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson, saw a group of 5 big thinkers take to the stage to discuss the possibility that we live out our lives in a universe that isn't actually real. One theory, that of philosopher Nick Bostrom, suggests that if it actually were possible for mankind to create such an indistinguishably realistic simulated universe, then it is significantly more likely than not that we are actually living inside such a universe right now. The possibility also exists of a simulated universe being created by people who are already living inside a simulated universe. An Inception-type scenario that could lead to an infinite chain of simulated universes, each existing within the other. If such a simulation actually does exist, it also begs the question, how could we ever know about it? There's certainly not going to be conclusive experimental proof that we're not in a simulation, said philosopher David Chalmers. Any evidence we could ever get would be simulated. In the end, the panel members each commented on how likely they believed it was that we are living inside a simulated universe, with some offering a probability as high as 42% and others maintaining that there is virtually no chance at all. And this has been Justin with your Paranormal Headlines.
This was a segment of Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
All right, folks, welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
And we are currently speaking with Mark Leslie, the author of Tomes of Terror. We've been talking about ghosts in libraries and bookstores, and it has been an amazing ride thus far. You know, ghosts are interesting. They're fun. You know, there's something fun about them. A lot of people find them very scary, and to some extent I understand why. I've had a lot of frightening experiences. But it's an interesting story because it makes us think about, it just brings up life outside of death, you know, and just what that all is. But, you know, unfortunately, we are coming to the end of the show here. And so, Mark, what I would like to do is just give you a few moments here to let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find your book. And, of course, if you'd like to just give any information for upcoming books that are about to be released anytime soon, feel free to do that as well.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm Mark Leslie, so it's markleslie.ca. That's markleslie.ca. On Twitter, I'm at Mark Leslie. I also have a Facebook page, Mark Leslie Author. And my books are available. There's links from my website, but I've got Creepy Capital, Ghost Stories of Ottawa. Basically the place where I learn to love history and learn to make sure that whenever I go to a new city, I always try and take a ghost walk tour of the city, because not only will I get some fun stories, but I'll also learn some amazing history. And that's what's coming out for me next.
All right.
All right, Mark. So thank you so much for being on. Maybe once you get the new book out, we will have you on again. But until then, have yourself a good night, and we will talk again soon.
Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, folks. That is Mark Leslie, author of Tomes of Terror. If you're watching the YouTube video, definitely check that out. Very awesome guy, very awesome guest. Had some very interesting stories to tell. He didn't seem like he had very many personal paranormal experiences, though, but that's okay. So yeah, Tomes of Terror. What'd you think on that?
I thought it was great. You know, it's fun listening, to just stories about historical places in which ghosts are happening. It's one thing, you and I come across a lot of ghost stories that happen in residential places, you know, and the majority of the time it's always some kind of tragic death or something like that brings forth the stories. Some of the most famous horror stories in the country, if not in the world, is like, at least from America, is like the Lizzie Borden home, for example, or Amityville Horror and stuff like that. It's all these frightening, creepy things. So it's kind of cool to have someone on who's done the investigations, if you will, and the research on these stories that are just, I guess, more happy, you know, and a little more, you know, just relaxed and inviting type of stories, you know, as opposed to, oh, get out, and I'm gonna scare you or whatever. So, you know, it's definitely interesting, definitely fun. And I wish we had more of these kind of conversations, actually, because the actual horror part of ghosts, even though it's necessary to talk about that and share that stuff,
right?
You know, it gets a little old after a while, the horror thing,
or just doing the serious, or
like the serious. Just, I mean, this is serious too. Well, I mean, but you know what I mean. You just sometimes. We have people, and I'm not saying anyone that we've had on the radio show, but just people that we've either seen on TV or that you and I have talked to one-on-one outside of radio and stuff like that, who are just like, you know, it's my goal in life to find out what this thing was that haunted me as a little child and has tortured me ever since. Right. And she's like, you know, I don't care. You know, I mean, it's a good story. I've been through it too.
Right.
Let's hear some good stuff. I want to know more about Casper, not his 3 uncles. So, but none the least, you know, the horror stuff is good. And of course, I know what I just said. It's going to keep people from sharing their stories in the future. But no, share your stories. Share all your stories, good or bad, that you have with the paranormal and the spiritual side of life, if you will, because that's something that, you know, Justin and I love discussing. As you all know, it's also something we like helping with if you need help with it.
Right.
I know him and I have already put out numerous times, you know, if you need help because you're dealing with some kind of haunting or something like that, reach out to us, you know, send us an email, message us on Facebook, wherever you can reach us. And we'd be more than happy to talk with you and just get to know what the situation, help you through it and get out of it, and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I think it's good to have books like this, though, every once in a while, because what it does, which is very important, you know, this is something that's very important, because Mark was saying that him and his editor were kind of not debating, but just discussing what to do with all the extra historical, you know, documentation and whatnot that Mark had put in the book. And they compromised, which is really good, because a lot of books don't compromise. It's either in there or it's not. Yeah. And I think it's very important to have all of that documentation there, because the historical I'm getting hate mail now. The historical documentation really helps bring the story to life and makes it more genuine, because the true paranormal investigator is going to be a history buff to some extent.
Right.
You want to know all about the history if you want to know what's happening now, today, you need to know the history of something.
Right.
You know, and whatever that history consists of, you know, it could be good, it could be bad, it could be a mix of things. It could have been bad at one point and changed. And it's the same thing when you meet new people. Obviously, you're not just going to go up to some random stranger and become their best friend. Not unless you know who they really are.
Right.
You need to know their history. You need to know who they are, how they've changed, so on and so forth. And it's the same thing when getting into a situation like this, where you're looking for ghosts, or, you know, going to an investigation or something. You need to know the history so you know what you're getting yourself into, as you had said a little earlier in the show as well. You just got to know what you're getting yourself into, which is why sometimes it's scary. It took me a moment to figure out what the heck that was.
I took your advice and got the hopping sound.
See, you did it at the beginning of the show, and my mic or my headphones went out, so I heard the boing, and then I didn't hear you say anything. I was like, "What the heck was that?" That has nothing to do with ghosts. And now it's like, oh, that's a rabbit trail. Yay!
So and you guys will hear some of the history of the places that Eric and I did investigations on when we continue the Ghosts Among Us series episodes in the next several weeks here. It was really fascinating, not to go on another rabbit trail, but some of the places we had went to, like the bar and the Rockefeller Center, what that used to be before it became this business building. So I think I agree. You have to be a history buff to a certain extent if you're a paranormal investigator, because you're going to have to do that research to find out what is there. So in the next couple of weeks here, we've got next week we got Tom Carey. I'm not sure if John Schmidt is going to be joining us, but he is a co-author of the book, which is Children of Roswell. Definitely going to be an interesting one, because you always hear about the people that what was the guy's name that we both talked to his dad was the sheriff that went to the Roswell crash.
Jesse Marcel. Jr.
Yeah.
Jesse Marcel Jr. Yep.
Yeah, so, the story of Jesse Marcel Sr., we hear that all the time, or some of the other people that were firsthand, but it's interesting to see that there's actually some type of cover-ups or something going on with the children of those people that found the Roswell crash. Week after that, we got Joshua Cutchin on to talk about a Trojan feast. So a lot of great stuff coming up here for you guys. On April 20th, I believe, Jerry will be back with Thai Girl for God Radio, and I believe she's talking about aliens or alien abductions or something like that as well. So stay tuned for all that great stuff, folks, right here on the Paratruth Radio Network. Do you have any final announcements before we head out?
Nope.
I get the head shake. That's all I get.
That's all you got? You didn't hear the thing? I did talk, but I guess it didn't go through.
All right, folks. Until next week, where you will find us same time, same channel. I am Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace.
If you enjoyed this episode of Paratruth Radio, and you would like to listen to it again, or are interested in listening to any of our past episodes, then you can listen to them on HD at our website, paratruthradio.com.
And you can also find us at Stitcher, Blueberry, TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube.
And of course, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for brand new updates of our show every day.
This